Hello, friends and neighbors. This is my second video today, but I wanted to explain some things. First, I am sure that there are a lot of people who are believers who are offended at my remarks about modern medicine and doctors and drugs and things like that. And so I want to cover that. The first thing I'm going to say is that yes, I believe God does sometimes use modern medicine, but I don't believe that is his preference. So let me ask you this. Do you think that slavery was God's idea? Of course it wasn't. Do you think that God approved of slavery? Of course he did not. But if you read the Old Testament, you read in the New Testament, the Bible, we see that there was slavery among God's people. And I believe that's because he knew their culture, he knew what their thoughts had been saturated with. They believed and were taught that slavery was okay, and slavery was a little different back then. Among the Jewish people, among Israel and the Hebrews, they treated their slaves like family. But still, slavery is wrong. It was wrong. And I don't believe God approves of it. But I believe he allowed it until they had time to come to know him and know what pleased him and what didn't please him, to work out those other things in their life. And I believe that that is how God does with modern medicine. There's nothing in the Bible to indicate that God's plan is for us to go to a doctor and take drugs. The Bible speaks that God's plan is for us to walk in wellness, in shalom, which is complete wholeness of body, soul, and spirit. The Hebrew people never separated the spirit and the body. They were considered one and the same thing. But I believe that God uses modern medicine sometimes because we don't have the faith to stick with his plan. We haven't been taught the Bible. We have been taught a version, a tradition that says God doesn't heal anymore. We've been taught that God only heals some people and he doesn't heal other people, but there's no rhyme or reason to it. And none of that is biblical. And I have written a small booklet on my study of healing, and all this is in that booklet. And I also did a series of videos about all of this. But I believe that God does use modern medicine, but I believe he prefers not to. And one of the most common sense reasons to me is because modern medicine can be very harmful. Modern medicine very seldom cures anyone. When God heals, he cures. Have you watched the commercials on TV about drugs? Have you seen all the side effects and the warnings from drugs? Do you believe drugs and modern medicine like that is God's invention, that he would create something faulty that could harm us? I don't believe that. I believe he allows it because of where we are spiritually, and that we don't have the faith that is required to follow God's healing plan, and so we go with man's. If you stop and think about it, we trust the doctor more than we trust God. And sometimes, in my case, it almost killed me. There's a lot of cases like mine. And that's because if you followed my journey with my kidney failure, it happened because of medicine I was taking that I had been prescribed for years, and no one ever told me the danger. And so my opinion about modern medicine has changed, and not just me, there are a lot of people. So I want to just kind of go over some things that I put in the book, some of the things about modern medicine. And it says, and I'm going to kind of read it, talk about it. Man can intervene with surgery and things like that, but we must realize that God's way is better. There are many side effects and eventual long-term problems with man's attempt at healing. And on a side note, very seldom does modern medicine heal. All they do is do the best they can to diagnose what's wrong with you, and then they prescribe a drug that does not heal you, or you wouldn't be taking it for 20, 30, and 40 years. What they do is prescribe a drug that somewhat manages your symptoms, and in the meantime, it's got all kinds of side effects. So the drug they're giving you to manage your symptoms can kill you. And I assure you, that is not God's plan for healing for his people. I believe that if we understood God's plan, if we build up our faith, then we wouldn't have to use man's methods, man's faulty methods. So just take surgeries, for example. Have you ever had surgery? It's very painful, and they don't tell you what it's going to be like ahead of time. It's shocking when you discover the truth. Do you really think that God intended for us to be cut apart with metal and plastic pieces put in to replace something that's wrong? God can create a new heart. God can create new pieces. He can heal what is broken and is fixed. There are serious risks and long-term problems with anesthesia. Surgeries longer than 6 hours, and all this information I got off the National Institute of Health government website. Surgeries longer than 6 hours carry a significant short and long-term mortality and disability rate. Even simple surgeries can have complications of hemorrhaging, wound infections, deep vein thrombosis, pulmonary embolism, lung complications, and reactions to anesthesia. I just saw on the news where a girl died having her tonsils removed. Does this sound like something that God would create and recommend for his people? Now, I believe that because this is where a lot of us are, I believe that he can intervene and make sure that we come through it alive, but I believe he has a better plan. At least 7 million people suffer complications following surgery every year, including at least 1 million deaths. And all of these statistics I'm giving you are several years old. There's no telling what it is now. And the medical world believes that many of these deaths are preventable. In 2018, at least 250,000 patients died from medical mistakes at the hospital. Do you think that is God's plan? About 128,000 die every year from adverse drug reactions, taking medicine as prescribed. And what about all the ones that are not reported or misdiagnosed? There's no telling what the real numbers are. And these numbers are not even looking at the horrible, life-altering side effects from prescribed medicine. 69% of all drugs have at least 10 to 100 different side effects. And most doctors just lightly dismiss if you mention any concerns about side effects. Just read the inserts for your prescribed medicine and you will be shocked. And if you ask your doctor, they will shrug it off. A study in Taiwan showed an association between radiation exposure from CT scans and an increased risk for thyroid cancer and leukemia. Every single CT scan increases your chance of cancer. Do you think this is really God's preference for our life? I could go on and on and on about complications from colonoscopies, mammograms, and all kinds of things. I just don't believe that this is God's plan for us. And I know most of the people watching this, almost everybody's on drugs. Almost everybody's on drugs, but you will be surprised at how many messages I get from people saying, I want to get off of all this medicine. help me pray, or what did you do? And I believe that there are good people in the medical field. I believe that things like physical therapy, chiropractors, there's different things that can help us maintain our health. But and I think drugs are just about the worst thing we could ever do to our body. They can kill us. I remember the Lord warning me. I was taking 8 pills a day, and I remember every night, and I told this in another video that I have on YouTube, I would take those pills and I would hear this voice tell me, these drugs are killing you. Multiple times. I heard the voice telling me multiple times. I would almost get sick to my stomach every night when I got ready to take my medicine. And I just kept thinking, Lord, I'm single. It's just me. I can't work without these drugs. I can't function without this medicine. I didn't have enough faith. And then I almost died from taking that medicine. And I've spent hours and hours and hours studying the scriptures and praying and seeking God. And every day I am more and more convinced that man's plan is not best for us. That we have been lied to, we have been tricked into believing that all of these things are safe, and it is for the pharmaceutical industry. They're motivated by money, and it's terrible and it's shocking. And so if you are on medication and you are offended by these things I'm saying, please understand, I'm not saying you're a bad person because you take medicine. Obviously, I took medicine too, and I'm going to tell you something else. If I would have known 2 years ago what I know now, I would have never went on dialysis. I would have died first. I would have never went on dialysis. There are so many things in the Old Testament. First, in addition to what I've just talked about, there are other things. The blood is sacred to God. Life, anything that brings life is sacred to God. Do you know in the Old Testament there's laws about semen, about not letting semen hit the ground, or you know what that can mean. But there are laws about blood, not eating or drinking blood, or ways to treat blood as sacred, because there is life in it. And then we think it's okay to kill a child. That's even more advanced life than just blood or semen. And if I had it to do all over again, I would not have gone on dialysis. But even though I had been praying and praying up until this, whenever it just happened so suddenly, when I went in the hospital, and I went because I couldn't, it was during COVID, I couldn't get in, and I knew something was wrong. I was getting a weekly lab report. I went and got my labs done every week. And I saw that my kidney function had dropped to 11%. And I could not get into a doctor. So I went to the emergency room at the VA, and they threw me in the hospital. And the next thing I know, there is a room full of doctors and experts around me. They were apologizing that I had been neglected and that I had been allowed to continue getting worse with no care. And they just said, you have to go on dialysis immediately. And the next thing I know, they were cutting a hole in my throat and inserting tubes. And if I wish I would have just said, I need time to pray about this. I wish I would have, but it was all scary and quick and panicky. And I've learned a valuable lesson in the last 2 years. And the main lesson I have learned is that we can trust no one but God. If if the Lord sees that maybe we don't have the level of faith we need for healing, then I believe that he can send us to the right person, the right doctor, who allows God to work through him to help us until our faith gets stronger. Our faith is supposed to be growing. We're supposed to be trusting him more and more. So please understand, I'm not saying you're a bad person if you use modern medicine. I'm just trying to say God has a better plan, and I'm sticking with his plan from now on. Come what may. I love you. Bye.